What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/StoriesAboutKevin. Alright, this story's called ThisKevin Thinks That He Knows More About Where I Was Born and Lived for 24 Years than me. So this happened quite a few years ago to me, but on a recent conversation I remembered about it and thought it would be a funny story to share. So my wife's dad's side of the family is filled with the most entitled and brown-nosed people you can think of. They all think they are better than everyone else, even though they really are not. And, well, we don't usually confront them about it because it just leads to fights, escalation, and things like that. Back when my wife was at the hospital to undergo a surgery, I spent a few days at my father-in-law's sister's house. Now, this woman is something else. She is extremely condescending, thinks that her job is the job because she works the city hall, even though her job isn't that big of a deal. I think she's some sort of glorified secretary or something. Constantly makes up gossip and fake tales to gossip around town just to see other people suffering, and is a terrible mother. I could go on for hours about her, but this particular tale isn't about her. Oh no, it's about her husband, Kevin. Kevin is a moron, but he's a moron that thinks that he's smarter than everyone else. He will say the most ridiculous things you can imagine, and if you try to talk back or tell him he's wrong, he will throw a fit and rant for hours about how he is right about it and all these facts that he knows and that you don't, and if you say something like, "but there's nowhere speaking about this," then he will claim that he won because, "see, if you can't find it, it's because you don't know how to research it right." He also has a gambling problem where he spends a load of money on online auctions for broken trucks. Not that he ever repairs them or do anything, he just buys them and leaves them in his backyard to rot. One time I was told by my mother-in-law that he had spent over $20,000 on an old truck that only had the metal frame and wheels intact. He claimed that, "I can build a 2-floor mobile house with this," and to my knowledge, he never even began sketching the plans for it. Another thing is that he works as a mason, but he is terrible at it. He never takes measurements, lays down foundation, nor anything. He just pours cement, lays the brick, and done. If it stands, then it stands. If it doesn't, then it's the client's fault for messing with it. My father-in-law told me about one time where they were working on a house and Kevin placed the windows and used small wires to hold them in place. Now that you know a bit more about this individual, we can move on to the time where I had my first interaction with the guy. So I'm from Brazil, more specifically Rio de Janeiro, and I moved to the rural side of Sao Paulo to live with my wife. Like I said, she had to undergo surgery and I had spent a few days in my father-in-law's sister's, for convenience sake let's call her Karen's, house because it was closer to the hospital to visit my wife since I couldn't stay in the hospital since it wasn't allowed. One day we all had dinner together. Karen had made some cassava manioc. Seriously, America, what the hell is this name? And we were all eating at the dinner room. Then Kevin asked me where I was from and I said Rio de Janeiro. It was my first year there. They still didn't know me all that well and thought that was that. He would ask me about the beaches, landscapes, things like that. Then he turned to me and said, "So, which factory did you live in?" To which I had to pause for a second to process it. I turned to him and said, "What?" And then the following conversation happened. "Yes, which factory did you used to live in? After all, Rio de Janeiro is this giant factory complex." Assuming it was some kind of joke, I chuckled and said, "Well, I'm from blank. I never heard of it. What do they produce?" "I'm sorry?" What product do they produce? You know, like chairs or tables or car parts?" He said that in an extremely patronizing tone of voice to me, which did make me feel a bit insulted, but I just continued to tag along. None of those things. I lived in a condo and He cut me off and raised his voice. "As if! I know that state. It's all just factories and mechanical constructions. I've been there before, you know, so I know exactly all about it. But I get it. You must be still having a hard time getting adjusted to Sao Paulo since it's so different from your old factory. After all, here we plant what we eat. We have rural zones and farms to grow our crops and animals. Unlike Rio, which just buys everything processed and packaged from us. You'll see how much more healthy we all are. For example, I bet you never had this soup before because over in Rio, it's all just processed and prepackaged packaged food. Here we use our stoves to cook. If you want, I can show you what oranges are and how we grow them. It comes from trees. So, yeah, this guy honestly believed that Rio de Janeiro was nothing but factories as far as the eyes could see, and that we all lived and worked in them. I was honestly expecting this guy to turn to me and ask if I was a robot too. Well, after that last sentence from him, I had to bite my lip hard to not burst out in laughter after hearing so much nonsense. But I wanted to know how far it would go, so I turned and said, "Alright then, what about our beaches in the Cristo Redentor? Cristo Redentor, I don't know. Is that big statue of Jesus?" And then Kevin said what was the last straw for me. In an annoyed grunt and a roll of eyes, he for real says this: "Oh, come on! Everybody knows that statue is just a fabricated myth. It never existed, and you just say that to make us believe you're like us. Honestly, I find it quite low you'd use the saint name of Jesus in such a lie, but what could I expect from a state filled with people that do not have faith in God?" I couldn't hold it in any longer, and I just burst out in pure laughter. I had a cramp from laughing so much and had to excuse myself outside to stop. I was in tears, I laughed so much. The next day, I went to visit my wife in the hospital and told both her and my in-laws about that encounter, and we had the laugh of this century, especially since my mother-in-law told me Karen called her telling how disrespectful I was to her that day and made fun of her husband when he was just trying to educate me. So, yeah, that was my encounter with the Kevin. After that, he never really spoke to me anymore other than hi when we came to visit. Hope you had a laugh as good as I had today. That makes me think of my ex-girlfriend's stepdad. Well, I got along with him pretty well because I thought he was a pretty funny guy, and we used to laugh and we used to have fun like making fun of her together. But she did not get along with him because he was kind of a bigot, more or less, and he would make stupid claims and stupid comments, and she would get so pissed off. Oh my god, it was funny. I still like the guy though. He was funny. But yeah, he definitely has a little bit of work to do on himself in terms of character. Alright, this story's called The Kitchen of Horrors, or How I Met a Herd of Rabid Kevins and Lived to Tell the Tale. I'm probably just unlucky to get so many dumbasses in my way, or somehow I've developed the worst superpower in history, a magnetic field that only attracts dimwits. Or maybe there's so many of them, one just can't help but bump into the molasses for brains everywhere. I don't know. All of this to say that the following shining examples of Kevinness are unrelated to the other kitchen Kevin I've already written about. Sadly, they are everywhere. They are legion. Background: I've worked for a short time in a busy chain restaurant in the middle of London and resigned when my Kevin tolerance reached its limit. Head chef was this kid, about 25. Not that that would be a bad sign per se. I've done a cooking course under a 22-year-old chef who is a natural talent and a genius. But this guy, 1 year earlier, was working as a runner, had no experience and, as it came out later, no formal knowledge or training. He did work hard, but not smart. Kitchen had an incredibly high turnover rate. Staff was coming and going on average of at least one change a week, either someone resigning or someone else coming in. Not a good sign. Now down to the Kevinalities. Head Kevin had no fucking clue about organization, teamwork, or task distribution. Basically, it was everyone for himself. An example: you have 3 burgers with sweet potato fries on the ticket. One with cheddar cheese and bacon, the other with red Leicester, I don't know, an onion ring. A good kitchen team of 3 gets one to grill the burgers and drop the fries, another to cut, toast, and prepare the bread with lettuce, tomato, and whatnot, and the third one on the pass to handle the rest, warming the plates under the pass lights, preparing the sauce pots, garnish, and so on. Check everything and sending the food to the customers. This kitchen worked on, you get the ticket, you handle it from start to finish, resulting in chefs tripping all over each other, dishes prepared twice twice or not at all, traffic jams on the counter, and no final quality control. Both Head Kevin and Second Kevin, they were actually housemates, had no idea what cross-contamination was, and to this day, I'm fairly certain they both faked their online courses on health and safety. Once, Second Kevin had to prepare some bacon strips. He grabbed a bag of uncooked bacon, laid it on the pass. First goddamn huge mistake. Raw meat on the counter where you assemble the dish you're sending to the customer. Took a brown cutting board, the one that's color-coded to be used exclusively for stuff like onions, raw potatoes, and such. A yellow knife, aka the one color-coded to be used exclusively for cooked meat, and starts chopping. One of the floor managers comes in, sees that, his face goes white, takes everything from under Second Kevin, moves the proper red-colored board and knife on the counter in the raw prep area, and drops the rest in the dishwater straight away. Second Kevin gets upset because he didn't understand what was wrong. Well, yeah, cross-contamination is bad, but I'm fairly certain that bacon isn't raw. Like, even if it's like uncooked, quote-unquote, it's still a cured meat, so you're safe to eat it like that, as is. But still, dangerous, because what if it wasn't bacon? They used to prepare coleslaw from scratch using the sink as a mixing bowl. The sink was reserved for washing vegetables, mainly potatoes, more often than not without even bothering cleaning it beforehand. Most boroughs have their own rules for garbage collection. Some sell pre-taxed bags and only collect rubbish that's been packed in them. This was one of them. Big Kev, the manager, didn't buy the rubbish bags once for whatever reason, so he couldn't put the garbage out for collection for 2 freaking weeks. Genius idea? Let's hide it all in the basement. An average of 4 large bags per day of leftover food, flour, vegetable trimmings, chicken bones, eggshells, stale bread, festering in a basement for 2 weeks. Speaking of Big Kev, I've heard through the grapevine that he was originally training as a general manager elsewhere, then all of a sudden he got transferred and demoted to a simple waiter until a friend of his, the one who hired him in the first place, a middle-level manager, stepped in and reinstated him as manager in training. What happened, I can't know, but I guess some serious crap had been going on. Maybe theft or dealing. Company probably didn't have definitive proof for hiring him and opted for demotion. Head Kevin. Tomorrow is the busiest day of the week. Let's just put 2 of them on shift and make one of them the new kitchen porter, literally at his first job experience that we hired 3 days ago. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Guess what? The chef resigned the very same evening, and then Head Kevin did that again. Oven had a self-cleaning cycle, but it needed some chemicals, of course. 2 blue bags and a red bag, coming in conveniently in one delivery. They ran out of red bags because all the Kevins were just dropping 3 bags of whatever was closest to grab. We had a blast chiller with an additional defrost functionality. Of course, none of the Kevins ever actually bothered to learn what was its purpose, and how to use it. They were using it as a spare fridge, or to cool down preps before the walk-in fridge. Or so they thought. They never realized it was set on defrost all the time, keeping all the food in that nice, comfortable temperature range for bacteria to reproduce like crazy. Or, to quote Chef Ramsay, "You're trying to kill someone, you freaking donkeys." Oh my god, that's terrifying. You never know how mismanaged a kitchen is when you go to a restaurant. I mean, I'm sure that, some smart people could figure it out just by looking. But as someone who is always blissfully naive and just has the utmost trust in like anyone, I never have a problem with going to restaurants. Like, it's not something that bothers me. Unless like I get sick from it, then like, yeah. But I haven't gotten sick from eating food at a restaurant, not that I can tell. But when I was in Pakistan, I did. Twice. I almost died. Twice. It was terrible. Oof. God, I hate food poisoning. Alright, this story's called Kevin versus Canada. My neighbor's daughter, we'll call her Sheila, married Kevin. I've only had the displeasure of meeting him once. He has an opinion on everything, and he thinks it is very important that he tell you his opinion. When Kevin, who is a heavy equipment operator, told me how to better use my backhoe, I listened because I figured his 20+ years of experience had taught him something. When Kevin tried to tell me how to farm on Florida sand, when he has lived in Alaska all but a couple of years of his life, I ignored his advice. He kept chattering away, but in an effort to be polite and friendly to his in-laws, my neighbors, I said nothing. Kevin and Sheila were moving back to Anchorage and visiting Sheila's parents for one last time before they set out. They rented a moving van and loaded up everything they own. I was happy to see them go. Jeez. When they got to the Canadian border, the Canadian Border Services Agency, or CBSA, asked them if they had anything to declare. Kevin declared that he is an idiot, but used other words. He was argumentative and, according to Sheila, told the border guards that as an American, they had no right to ask him anything. Oh my god. CBSA, unmoved by the logic of Kevin's American exceptionalism, then asked Kevin if he had any guns to declare. Kevin loudly explained to the CBSA officer that as an American, he has Second Amendment rights that shall not be infringed. At that point, the infringing began. Kevin was asked to step out of his vehicle while it was searched. CBSA found an unloaded magazine for a semi-auto pistol. That in itself is not necessarily illegal in Canada, but failing to declare weapons, even for transport through Canada, is illegal, and oddly enough, the Canadians don't really give a frick about US constitutional rights. The magazine and Kevin's attitude gave them probable cause, and Kevin was handcuffed while a team was brought over to search the contents of the moving van. All the boxes were removed and placed on the shoulder of the road while they were unpacked. Eventually, a gun was found, and Kevin was marched off to jail. CBSA then told Sheila she was free to go, but all her stuff was unpacked and lying on the road. It took her the rest of the day and into the night to repack and reload the van. She didn't have food or drink to help her get through the day, but she was eventually given a bottle of water by a sympathetic soul. Kevin spent a week in Canadian jail, paid a fine, and had to purchase transportation to get him through to Anchorage, Alaska. Sheila and Kevin were divorced a few months later, much to the relief of Sheila's parents. This story was told to me by Sheila after she returned to Florida to live with her parents. Final score? Kevin, 0. Canada, infinity. That is hilarious. How very American of him to be like, I've got the Second Amendment. You can't take my goddamn guns. Sir, this is Canada. Yeah, they're scared of guns up there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.